Welcome back to the show, everybody. Got Caleb Martin on here for his second time around here. Thanks for taking some time out of your Monday evening.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me back, dude. Appreciate it.
So I was looking back at our last episode, and it was 1:30, and it was actually right about the same time of year because we were talking about the draw results.
Yeah, that's so funny. We are again, just had the draw tag system. I don't even know what I drew then. Did we talk about it on the show, what I drew on that episode?
I was trying to think about the same thing. Like, I'm sure we did, but I don't remember. So what did you end up hunting last year?
Last year, I drew a tag up in on the Hall Road and kind of focused all my energy on that because we had my daughter on the opening day of sheep season last year. So I didn't plan a whole lot, and I was pretty lucky to have a tough woman that was willing to let me drag her 5 weeks after giving birth up into northern Alaska to go hunt moose. So,
wow, that is pretty crazy. That's sweet. I do think I remember that now. He's talking about that. Huh.
Yeah, a lot of people, thought we were pretty crazy doing that, but that's our lifestyle. We love the outdoors. We live the outdoors, and it's my job now with the Alaska Outdoor Council, and I'm absolutely super passionate about it. So even though we do, our daughter, she's just turned 6 months now, and we're already planning our first sheep and caribou hunt, a backpack style hunt this year, and she'll be going along with us again. And a lot of people think we're crazy, but that it's just who we are. It's part of us. We're not going to stop doing what we love because we're parents now. We're just going to raise our daughter doing the same thing.
Yeah. That was the thing. I was, when you look at the reactions to the draw results, and it's the same every year, people are upset that they don't draw anything, but there's so many other hunts that you can make happen over the counter. Like, you don't have to draw things. It's almost as if people want some sort of excuse to not do things and blame the state or blame the system. When, well, if you would have drawn this caribou tag, you would have flown up there and done it. So why don't you find an over-the-counter tag and spend the same amount of money to go do that? Like, it's increasingly making less sense to me why people should whine about it. I didn't draw anything, and so I'm going to head up to Fairbanks and do that 40-mile cull the herd hunt next month. So it's not, the August where you can get a nice bull with a bunch of antlers or big antlers, but man, it's going to be sweet. A different experience, go up there in March when it's still cold and take a snow machine out, and that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And every hunt is like a little bit different adventure. And I've killed way more caribou, on draw tags. I've killed more caribou on harvest tags than I ever have draw tag. I've only taken one caribou and it was the smallest caribou I've ever taken was on a draw tag. But Alaska has so many opportunities. I talked to people about this, and we just had our big banquet this weekend, and I got to talk to hundreds of Alaskans about this exact issue, because a lot of people have talked about preference points, and a lot of people have even gone as far as advocating for preference point systems. But that being said, you can use a little bit of strategy going into the draw and have some luck. Sometimes you won't have luck, but if you don't try, you're not going to have any luck. And that goes for the same as if you put in for a draw tag or put in for a harvest tag. Alaska is very, very large with very many opportunities. And, all the sheep I've ever taken, I've never taken a sheep on a draw tag. I hunt sheep solely on harvest tags. Except this year I drew a sheep tag, and I'll be trying to get one on a draw tag there. But man, it's all in how much effort you put into it. And the more effort you put into it, the better your outcome's going to be, whether it's putting in for a draw tag, not getting it, and keep hunting for it, or just go the way you hunt in general, going out into the field, putting 110% effort into it day in and day out, and that includes all aspects of the hunt, not just, the time you're there, but how much time you invest in it, how much time you invest in researching, how much time you invest into your gear and testing that gear and making sure it's going to be reliable, how much time you spend on the range. Hunting to me anyways is a lot more than just 10 days out of the year. I know people have 9-to-5 jobs, and you're limited on what you can do, but I think hunting is truly one of those things. The more you invest in it, the more you get out of it.
Yeah, right. And it's kind of sad to see so many out-of-state people willing to invest so much more time than people who live in state. And that's not to, I don't want to be all anti-resident, but there is something to be learned from these people who are looking at some of the things that we have as once in a lifetime opportunities. And once we kind of look at things from that perspective, then we can appreciate what we have and make the things happen that we can and go from there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And I think what a lot of it comes down to, and what I realize, and maybe it's just me growing a little bit and aging a little bit, but once I realized a lot of these social media arguments and a lot of these arguments that are really crippling to the hunting community are based on experience and perspective on what people's experiences are. And they don't really realize, I think a lot of people don't realize how those perspectives are different across the state and why they are in certain ways. Like one of my board members and the president of AOC, he's been putting in for bison for 30 some years. He kind of feels we should go to a preference system. But in other areas where people have drawn tags consistently through the years, they don't want it. But, if I was somebody who's put in for a tag that has, I don't even think it's a 1% draw rate on that bison tag, but if I've only put in for that one tag for 20 years and invested a lot of money into it at this point, and I lived here for my entire life, I'd be pretty upset too. And so I can understand their point of view, but then you can't really make a blanket statement where the system is unfair because I didn't draw. Well, what tags did you put in for, and what, if you're not saying you're successful and basing it on calling out the draw system as a whole, that's not really fair, because you have to understand that some of these tags are extremely hard to draw with very low draw rates, and in a randomized draw, there's always going to be those people that have been here a short time, and there's always going to be those people that don't draw that have lived here a long time. That's just a matter of statistics. But you can't call out the entire draw system as a whole when you're basing your opinion on that just not being able to draw one really hard tag. I think we talked about it in my last episode, how my perspective on what, my draw strategy is. I put all 6 chances in for one hunt, and I do it and then pick that hunt based on the highest probability and my ability to access those areas. Mm-hmm. And, I'm extremely lucky and blessed, and I know that. I've drawn at least one tag every year I've put in since I started putting in 9 years ago. And sometimes a couple of years I drew as high as 4 tags. A lot of people find that unfair too. But that being said, I'm a little biased. I want to advocate. A lot of people want to shut it down where you can only draw 1 or 2 tags a year. You're not allowed to draw 4. But I think a lot of people don't realize the kind of ripple effects. The draw tag system is, first off, to manage our wildlife. And second off, to raise money for the management of those wildlife. And so, when you start restricting the number of times people can put in, you're going to affect that amount of funding, and that amount of funding is in turn going to affect the management. I like the system we have in place, and not only, I'm biased because I've drawn several tags over the years, but also because we have some of the best management in the United States, if not the world, when it comes to game management. Why would we want to mess that up when we have so many other opportunities that we can go out and hunt and fish and fill our freezers every year without having to draw tags? In other states, if you didn't draw a tag, you don't hunt. In Alaska, you don't draw a tag, you just hunt somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the problem with some of that stuff is you want it to be perfect, and so you try and tweak it, but you end up being way worse than what you just had, and then you want to go back to it. You're seeing that down south with a lot of that point creep type stuff, and so the people who are in at the ground level, they like the preference point thing because they were able to make the hunt that they wanted to make happen. But then a couple years later, then people who are drawing it have 5 points and they're back to 0, and there's a chance they never draw it again because then you have the point creep, and so you try to improve it just a little bit more to make it a little bit more perfect, but ended up ruining the whole thing. So there's no perfect way to do this, and I'd hesitate, fussing with what we have right now, even though the only tag that I've ever drawn was the Edelin elk that all I always saw was a black bear in 6 days there. Mm-hmm. But there's so many other things that I think I have to do and owe it to myself and, being a resident to do first before I start to get really upset about not drawing Dall sheep or bison or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many, I always say this to a lot of people too, because they ask me, what's your bucket list? Have you ever hunted Africa and hunted Texas or hunted some of these other areas? And, I'd be more than happy to hunt some of those other areas. Africa, to me, I'm not super stoked on wanting to go hunt Africa. That's just personal preference. I just have to me, there's just too many places in Alaska I haven't been yet and too many species. I've pretty much hunted everything in Alaska except bison as far as species goes, but I prefer to hunt more areas in Alaska and have those different experiences because hunting moose on the Yukon and hunting moose in Kenai are completely different. Hunting moose on the Haul Road is completely another world compared to hunting moose on the Kenai. And, sometimes in my guiding industry too, I have a guide license and have guided several clients over the years. And sometimes, that will be my main purpose of guiding certain hunts is because I want to get out and explore other parts of Alaska and go guide people in different areas. So I've been employed as a guide for different areas around the state just to have that ability to go see that, So a lot of people get stuck on the draw tags for a specific reason, but man, explore a little bit, get out, get a harvest tag. You can find some amazing animals on harvest tag. I mean, we shot a sheep 2 or 3 years ago, 42 and a quarter inch ram, harvest tag area. And there's other areas with draw tag and toke last year. I talked to one guy in 17 days. They barely saw any rams. And I think he finally took a ram on the 19th day. And there were several people that got those toke tags that never had the opportunity to harvest or even got in a position to find a legal sheep up there.
Wow.
So, you got to put in your research, put in your time, and just make 110% effort. The draw tag's not a guarantee for sure, and a harvest tag isn't a guarantee that you're not going to take an animal either.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So you mentioned one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here is your membership with the Alaskan Outdoor Council. Are you a board member on that now?
I've been a board member for a while, and actually in November I was selected to be their executive director. So now I'm actually with the Outdoor Council full time, and that is my 9 to 5. Right. It's super rewarding. Coming in fresh, a lot of stuff was unfamiliar to me, but the more I learn about a lot of issues that affect Alaskans, the more it drives me to be passionate about it. And a lot of the things we talk about, I'm already passionate about. So it's been super enjoyable. And to be able to work with so many different people that work behind the scenes for conservation, game management, and legislation in Alaska, it's incredibly rewarding.
So what about a little bit of background on the Alaska Outdoor Council and what do you do and how does it try to impact or help the residents of Alaska or the hunters, anglers? Okay,
so the Alaska Outdoor Council has been together since 1955 and originally started with 3 different sportsmen's organizations wanting to come together and kind of unite the hunting community and outdoor community of Alaska to affect legislation and management in Alaska. So I think it was territorial sportsmen's, SCI and a couple other groups. One group, I'm going to misquote that, and so people listening don't hate me for that. But mostly groups from interior Alaska came together and formed an umbrella organization called the Alaska Outdoor Council, and we mainly advocate for two things. In the later years, it has evolved, and now these days it's about advocating for state management of wildlife resources, because the state manages based on science, and we support science-based management. And, when it comes to federal management of lands and land management, there's a lot of emotion and social kind of justice issues that affects that management there. And we don't agree with that. We think that, if you're going to change the management, whether it's access or land or wildlife, then it needs to be based solely on science. And we also advocate for public access to public lands and how to recreate, not necessarily just hunting, but access all over the board. We're a big part of John Sturgeon's case when John Sturgeon was on our court or on our board a few years ago, when he went to the Supreme Court and sued the federal government over navigable waterways in Alaska and won that court case. We knew those navigable waterways already belong to all Alaskans, whether they're in a park or refuge or not. But the Park Service, it helps to know the laws and know when you're in the right, because federal employees might not, and other private entities might not, and they might try to tell you something different, like they did with John Sturgeon. And John Sturgeon knew that he was in the right. So he took that federal lawsuit all the way to the Supreme Court. AOC was right there beside him on that, and won twice, and now changed that and set a precedence in Alaska that if you're on a navigable waterways and you're going through there on a boat or a hovercraft, depending on the regulations in that area, you're in the right to do that. And we also, like a few other different issues we're working on right now, when it comes to public land issues, like Thompson Pass. This has nothing to do with hunting, but there's a really popular area in Thompson Pass for skiing that a private corporation, Chugach Alaska, is working with the federal government trying to do a land exchange and exchange their land that they received under the Native Settlements Claim Act and trade it for what is called, quote, more economical valued land or viable land, and exchange that for the land that they received already. So they want to trade 1,200 acres of prime, popular public access land that's a very popular ski and snowboard area, and trade it for inaccessible land in the Wrangles that nobody can get into, and they haven't even specifically stated what that land looks like or where it is. So that's another issue that we are opposed and are involved in, or trying to see our way all the way through that and make sure that public land that has been protected and recreated in for decades is going to stay in public land, and we can continue to protect that going into the future. Mm-hmm. So we're, when it comes to public land issues all across Alaska, we're involved in them. Oftentimes at federal land management meetings, we're the only people there, and we've literally been asked why we are there in the past, like at federal subsistence board meetings where they are looking to close off access to non-local users. We're often there to testify about that, and we also work with the state of Alaska to try to rein in the federal subsistence board while they're abusing their power. You saw it in 2020 quite a bit in Unit 13A and Unit 13B, where a federally subsidized user, a lodge owner in the area, claimed that he was having conflicts with non-locals coming in and hunting his area, and they were pushing out all the moose. And so based on zero science, zero biological concern for the wildlife, in fact, the state says there's a robust amount of wildlife in that area. They closed 1.5 million acres of public land off to the general public. So only federal subsistence and local users could hunt that land because they wanted to keep non-local hunters out. But so we're fighting that and talking with the state on a bit of strategy, because the state actually filed an injunction is going into federal court. So we're deciding right now if we're going to join the state in that lawsuit or if we're going to come up with our own lawsuit, because, this Alaska state constitution says that wildlife and natural resources in Alaska belongs to all Alaskans and that we should be able to access and hunt that public land. And, we're not saying open it wide open. I know I get this a lot, that people go, well, we don't want roads everywhere and access every possible way. We're not saying that, but we're saying if there's an area and there's enough food sources that everybody could get access an area and hunt moose and hunt caribou, then everybody should. If there's a biological concern there, we should manage it, and we should leave that management up to the science of Alaska Department of Fish and Game, not a federal subsistence board that has federal subsistence users on it that are managing for their own personal benefit and doesn't take into account how it'll negatively affect that wildlife population or negatively affect the rest of the population of Alaska that lives off the road system. Mm-hmm. I know, like the other day, they changed Moose Pass to a rural designated federal subsistence area. Moose Pass is closer to Seward, while Nikiski's farther from Kenai. It's a farther, more rural area, and Nikiski's not considered a federally subsistence area. So now that it's a federal subsistence area, they could also close those federal lands to non-hunters that live in Seward, despite the fact that they're only less than 20 miles apart, maybe. So, a lot of it has to do with management resources and basing how we manage our resources on science, not on emotion or not on, conflicts that may or may not, in fact, be real.
Mm-hmm. After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
Do you find that most of the issues are from lower 48 interests or more Alaska interests that are trying to, I don't want to say selfishly, but tip the scales in their favor? Which one would you say that you deal more with as far as making things based on science rather than just preference?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with currently Alaskan-based entities. If you look at the land management or the land ownership of Alaska, a lot of people don't realize that the federal government runs and manages about 57% of the state. And then I noticed a lot of the Alaskan native corporations can put their lands in a trust and then have the feds manage that land too. So they can actually manage probably closer to 80% of the land in Alaska. And, Alaska, we've always had this kind of reputation of The last frontier, hunting and fishing is our way of life. And a lot of people in the hunting community don't even realize how much of their public land can be cut off and they can be cut out of hunting in those areas. And when you start, we recently put out a video on our Alaska Outdoor Council Facebook page talking about these issues. And it would amaze you at how many people not only didn't know that this was a realistic possibility, but that it's actually happening. And there's proposals in place to cut off hunting access in Unit 26, Unit 23, Unit 17, Unit 16. 1.5 million acres already happened in Unit 13. And, the list just goes on. And that's because, federal entities, the Federal Subsistence Board doesn't think they have to live by ANILCA, the agreement on the Lands Act that's in there. And a lot of the federal entities are using other acts related to other states and applying them to Alaska when, Alaska made an agreement with the federal government that ANILCA was a letter of the law of the land. And now they're interpreting ANILCA to whatever benefits them. And we have no enforcement from the federal government to rein them in. So what has resulted now is the state of Alaska sued the federal government and we're going to federal court over it.
How much knowledge do at the federal level do they have of Alaska and Alaska laws, or do they have any, or is it just pretty much applying the little that they know about the plight of some down south states or areas?
So a lot of Alaska federal land is ran based on federal subsistence users in Alaska, and then it's oversaw by the Department of the Interior and who's in charge of that. I know with the Biden administration, they have picked a few different people who would like to see land management and game management in the hands of private organizations across Alaska to manage their own land. And you got to wonder how effective that management is going to be when you got state, if you look at what their end goal would be, you're talking about native corporations managing game on their lands, federal managers managing game on their lands, and the state managing game on their lands. And you got to ask yourself, how effective would that be if you have a caribou herd or a fish? I can't think of the word, but if you got a group of fish that crosses those. Or a salmon run that crosses those three different areas, because animals don't care about our imaginary boundaries that we put in place. They're going to go where they want to go. So if you got one group that's managing based on whatever the public issue is, and you saw how that worked in British Columbia where they shut off grizzly hunting, or when you had a lot of people had a big problem with some allowing brown bear hunting or brown bear over bait, when they close off those different things in different parts of the state, those wildlife populations change according to that management principle. And Fish and Game manages it based on science and sustainable yield. And if you have a different entity that's managing to protect those overpopulated wildlife populations, it's going to affect this animals that are not on their land too. Like Kenai is a prime example, right? Recently we went to court and they're still not allowing brown bear baiting on the refuge. They don't think there's a problem with overabundance of bears. Well, the result of that is you got a bunch of bears and a lot of wolves in that area. And you look at 15A and the brown bears, you got a lot of human conflicts in town. You got a lot of population, drops in population and moose and caribou populations because you got an overabundance of bears and wolves. And on federal, and their primary denning locations are on federal land, but they don't stay on federal land. They go hunt and eat the ones also on game management land. So the state's doing the best they can to manage those predators on state land, but you can't do it 100% effectively when you got an entity right in the same area that's not allowing that same level of management, right? It's not good for the wildlife. It's not good for the public. It's not good for Alaska.
Yeah. There's that notion that hunters would hunt things into extinction like it's the 1850s. When at this point now, hunters have seen, the value of conservation using science behind it. I was looking at that 40-mile herd that I'm going to go up and hunt in March, and how the population of caribou is at, above 80,000, which is great that it's recovered because they were managing to growth. But now it's to the point where, all right, well, if we're looking at the resources for the caribou, in order to keep a healthy herd, we need to drop these numbers a little bit, which is why they want to cut 10,000 from the herd. And so there was I think it was August or September hunt for 5,000. And there was the winter hunt too. And again, winter hunt is for protecting the habitat, which is during the winter with the snow, you're going to have snow machines driving on that rather than four-wheelers. And it's for the good of the herd. So you have science and you have hunters working together, whereas the more entities that get involved and the more access to people who don't know any better, it seems like it'd be a huge, frustrating thing to try to argue.
Yeah, and what a lot of people don't realize is that hunters in Alaska, in the past, has uncontrolled hunting done damage in Alaska? Absolutely. Has it done it in America? Absolutely. Actually, probably one of the biggest negative impacts to wildlife in the United States was unregulated subsistence hunting. Look at buffalo, mammoth, muskox, all kinds of stuff. When you put no regulations in place and you hunt specifically for food, or groups of people hunt specifically for food without management in place, we have killed off populations of animals. But now that we have management in place in Alaska Constitution, that's where sustainable yield comes in. We manage the herd so we have a little extra, and we're able to take that little extra out of the herd, but not hunt it too hard where that herd will take negative impacts. We fluctuate our management every year based on surveys, based on a very dedicated and in-depth and intensive game management system. Whoever thinks that we can hunt out a population in Alaska in 2021 just isn't informed and is ignorant on the issues, because if you look at it in depth, every population of Alaska has a biologist, every area of the state. The management we have now has never, in the history of Alaska, the management has never been as good as it is right now. We have biologists, we have teams, we have surveys, we have technology and innovative ways to get accurate numbers on what is being harvested and what is the current count in those animals. Actually, probably some of the worst management in Alaska comes from rural, federally managed lands, because you don't have accurate harvest reporting. It's estimated. And you don't have surveys as well because they're remote, and because of the lack of reporting, we can't put in more surveys in place because we don't know how much animals are being taken. So it's really hard to manage those rural areas and manage and get accurate counts of what's going on federal management on federal lands. And then you also have issues like we're running into that we just talked about, where they're trying to keep non-locals out. And then, that is going to affect the wildlife even more. Less moose are getting harvested, or less predators are getting harvested, less bears are getting harvested. And, access affects every different, different type of outdoor activity in Alaska, and it affects, it affects the environment, it affects the wildlife. A lot of people think, when we open up, that we just want to open up access everywhere to do the damage, but fail to see the damage that lack of access causes. If you look in the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge, prime example, we went up sheep hunting this last year, and those that know me, I don't like to talk myself up, but, I'll sleep underneath a tarp for 7 days in the rocks if I have to get on sheep. And we burnt a lot of boot leather. We probably do 20 to 30 miles in an area of the Kenai looking for sheep in an area that historically has had sheep. What we found in there was half a dozen wolf kills, caribou wolf kills. We found over a dozen coyotes. We found 12 to 15 bears and never seen a single living sheep. And you got to ask yourself, well, why are those predators so populated in there? Well, if you look at a few years ago, the feds changed the access, snow machine access in that area, which is how trappers were able to access that area to trap those predators. And now that snow machine access is only every other year once the snow load is good enough. So now we're not allowed to access the area to trap it, to be able to harvest those predators. Now we're not allowed to access the area to bear bait to harvest those bears. And that's going to increase those predator populations, and which in turn decreases the caribou, the moose, and the sheep and the goat populations in those areas. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a ripple effect across the board.
Yeah. We saw that in Southeast Alaska here because Unit 2, the Prince of Wales Island, has been a huge hot button topic or source of income for the Center for Biological Diversity and those other conservation groups that want to protect the wolves and get them listed. And there was that article that went around, I think it was in February of last year, maybe March, about how trappers had killed all but 3. And I thought, oh my
absolutely
God,
atrocious.
This is absolutely absurd because that's based on an estimate. And the estimate, I mean, it's impossible for the biologists. I don't begrudge them at all. Like, it's impossible for the biologists to get anything close to an accurate number. And so you have this estimate and you have a trapping season, and then based on the estimate, it looked like it were all but 3 or all but 5 or something like that. And so that, of course, gets sent off to all of these
anti-hunting groups.
All the anti-hunting groups who then put out press releases, so it gets picked up. I saw among many others, a newspaper near where I used to live in California picked it up, and this reporter reported that, and the Idaho Statesman reported it, and all these other magazines are reporting this press release that comes out that makes it look like, that Southeast Alaska, particularly Prince of Wales Island, is going to be the next, California or Oregon with no wolves because they've been trapped to extinction, which is crazy. And then this year there was a 3-week season and dozens were trapped. I don't know exactly what the number was, but it's based on this incorrect estimation. And it's not the fault of biologists not doing their job. It's the fact that you can't calculate how many there are because the land is so much more rugged. And people just assume that it's like down south where you can get the number down to 2 or 3, but people don't even care to look for themselves. Just take a Google map and just look around and say, oh, well, that's different. That's not like my backyard. There's not highways running everywhere.
Yeah, and it kind of cracks me up about wolves in general because, I probably spend 150 days of the year in a tent, give or take, sometimes more, sometimes less. But I get around, like last year, COVID hit and we built ourselves a camper van and in 3 weeks drove over 2,000 miles across Alaska, camping in the Brooks Range, fishing every body of water from Anchorage all the way to Dead Horse. So I'm not saying this from a perspective sitting in my house in Anchorage, not getting outdoors. I'm outside all the time. And people want to tell us how much damage we do to the wolves and how we go out and shoot them. Like you can go throw a rifle over your shoulder and go out in the woods this weekend and go hunt down a wolf and shoot it. Wolves are probably the hardest animals to hunt in Alaska. And trapping is the only real way to manage that population. Can you find one occasionally on a hunt and take it while you're hunting something else? Yes. But if you look at the comparison of how many hunters do that compared to how many hunters trap them, I mean, the difference is mind-boggling. Those are like one of the smartest, most intelligible animals in Alaska, and they hunt more efficiently than any other predator. They are extremely good at killing, extremely good at breeding, and extremely good at knowing when you're trying to hunt them. And, these people just have this persona that have no idea about Alaska, that we're just trying to kill off all these wolves without the understanding that, they might have a pack that grows from 15 to some packs upwards of 30 animals that could, take out an entire area of moose and do enough damage in an area and within a couple of years that it'll take us 10 years to bring that back. And you go out and try to hunt them. is spot and stock, and you might be in the area of those wolves and hunt them for, weeks on end and never even see one. I mean, I've lived my entire life up here and get out all the time, and I can tell you 3 times in my entire life where I've actually seen a wolf in the wild. Yeah. And none of those times has been in an instant where I was able to actually try to hunt them and harvest them. And I hunt, like I said, over half the year some years. Yeah. So this crazy idea that we can kill off all these wolves or that we should ban trapping, these people really do not understand the entire picture when it comes to those animals.
No. They want to protect the wolves because they think the wolves are going to be roaming around like it's Yosemite or Yellowstone. But wolves aren't made like that. Wolves don't do that. You might have some coyotes that you see run around a little bit, but wolves don't want to be seen. So just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there. It just means
and it cracked me up a few years ago talking about the Denali Park wolves. That's always been one of the biggest pressures by anti-hunting groups and preservation groups, not conservation, preservationists, is about the Denali Park wolves. Wolves are like one of the most elusive creatures there are, and they're mad because they're not seeing them. Well, if you saw them running around all over the place during the daytime, I would venture to say that they're probably overpopulated at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Yellowstone Park. Bring up those wolves down there. Look at the amount of management problems those states are having in areas outside of Yellowstone because they've managed those wolves to the point so people can see them like it's a zoo. Nature's not a zoo. It doesn't care about your emotions. It doesn't care about your feelings. It cares about facts and management based on science. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah. And if you side for wolves, then you're going to eliminate. You're going to have that boom and bust, right? So you're going to have the wolf population gets out of control until all the prey is eaten, which means that the population for food for locals, moose, caribou, whatever, deer in the Southeast, is going to be reduced, and it's going to take so much longer to reproduce because you have, if a moose has 2 calves, like maybe one surviving. Same thing with a deer. Yep. Right? If a deer has 2, hopefully one survives. Whereas you have a litter of wolf pups, so they can populate so much faster. Whereas it takes so much longer for the animals to recover. And it's just they don't look at that. They don't look at any time that they could have possibly been wrong because that would be to admit weakness, and all the money they got from people to try to protect that ends up, you're not going to get it back.
Oh, yeah. And what they don't understand is, I don't know if a study has been done on wolves like this, but, going back to kind of the same thing, but talking about the bears, in the Kenai area and the refuge area where they say the same thing, protect those bears. And one hunting group, it made me chuckle a little bit, those vulnerable bears of the Kenai, talking about the number of bears. I set it on a bait station last year in one spot. If you think about one tiny little spot in the entire Kenai, I set for 4 days. I was averaging seeing 14 to 17 brown bears a night, individual adult bears, right? That's a lot of bears. And they did a study a few years ago where they put a camera on the top of a bear to see really how much damage and what they're capable of. And one bear in 3 weeks killed 58 calves. One bear.
Jeez.
58 calves. That's moose, caribou, sheep, and whatever else they found. But if you think about that, that's one. And they're saying that there's no problem with overpopulation of bears. And I'm here to tell you, there's a problem with the population of bears on the Kenai when I can sit in one tree stand within a couple nights and see literally over a dozen bears a day. Yeah. I mean, come on now.
Well, it's weird, too, that you're siding with predators during like a pandemic, right? So we have people who have less access to food potentially, and yet still people are putting money toward the people who are going to, file lawsuits to get wolves protected or predators protected. Like, dude, you have people, this is their lifestyle, right? They can't afford to pay $9 a pound for meat at the store, and so they choose to go out and do it themselves. And you have, that traditional sort of, father-son, father-daughter mother, daughter, mother, son, going out, and we're going to go get our food ourselves. We're going to take responsibility for it. And you have people trying to deprive them of that experience because they don't understand it, they don't know, and they don't bother to just listen, right? And that's the thing. Just pay attention, just listen, like just see what the science says about this.
Right. And the big thing is because, and I've thought about this a lot, and it came out of, Joe Rogan did a podcast with Donnie Vincent a while ago, and there's a lot of different opinions on Donnie Vincent, but he had a pretty good statement, and they kind of talked about asking ourselves a hard questioning what we believe, why we believe that, and how we do it, but also questioning ourselves and looking at perspective from the other possibility. I talk to people a lot about in the hunting world, and it gets very heated debates, especially when somebody questions their beliefs on why they do things but it has allowed me, when questioning my own beliefs, to kind of gain a little bit of perspective on that. When you got somebody from, say, San Francisco, California, that's grown up there, they've always shopped at the grocery store, and the wildlife they see is generally in a park or in a zoo type setting. And then they see on the news, without knowing any about it, the news is telling them that these guys up in Alaska are shooting all the wolves, and there's only 3 wolves left in this area because these guys are just killing everything about it. Now, if you grew up in their shoes and their perspective, right, and you heard that on the news without questioning the news or never being in from Alaska, you just know your whole life that you got food from a grocery store, that animals are cool to look at it in a park and fuzzy and cuddly to hold and feed at a zoo, then you're going to be like, hey, that's pretty messed up that those guys are killing all those wolves. Does it make them bad people to think that? No. But, from their experience and their perspective, that's what the media is telling them without putting the whole picture in view for them to see. If you only show what you want to show, then people are going to only see what you show them. So I think a large of that comes down to the amount of bias in the media that we see. And I'm not going to get into politics about it, but whoever controls the information controls the agenda and controls the storyline. And I think a lot of people from out of state are, they probably have the best intentions at heart, but they just don't understand the entire thing. And that's why I push a lot of hunters, like, man, it's okay to disagree with people, but we as hunters got to realize that we're a minority, and there's a lot of people that are on the fence that we could help educate by questioning our own stances and forming a good argument based on facts and presenting it in a very civil way. A lot of people would be more receptive of that and understanding the importance of hunting and fighting that misinformation out there than the way that a lot of people currently do it. And every time somebody is an anti-hunter or non-hunter and questions their belief, they get attacked for it. Because if you attack somebody that's on the fence about hunting, I guarantee they're not going to be too super enthused about supporting your right to hunt. And people got to realize that the last couple of years, we've had a lot of conflicts in our country, and a lot of people have been passionate about one side or the other on a lot of different issues. But ultimately, we're the United States of America. We're all, and in Alaska, we're all Alaskans, right? And every one of us has the right to vote. So every one of us can individually affect the outcome of whether it's hunting or land management or politics or what have you. So the way we present ourselves as hunters, the way we present our way of life, and the way we present our perspective to other people is going to directly affect the longevity of our way of life here in Alaska.
Yeah. I like what you said about people coming to it like from the right position, as far as like, it's a heartfelt concern, right? It's not that they're intentionally being mean, they're the heart's in the right place. And I think that's a lot of people come from that perspective. It's not that, you're a ruthless, terrible person. It's just that, your heart's in the right place. However, there's some facts that haven't been presented to you either because of, where you live or what you're watching or whatever. And that's just, appealing to that. I think there are a lot of people who are open to that logic. And Like, well, I thought this because that's just what I thought. And they're open to like, oh, things are different. Okay, I gotcha. I think there are a lot more people who are receptive to those sort of things. And I've met people who aren't hunters, but they get it. And that's, I think there's a lot of those people out there. So I think, like you said, appealing to those people, there's some people who just, you're never going to convince. And so the only thing you're going to do by name calling or getting nasty is just to, generate more money for the other side. There's a lot of people in the middle who are just kind of indifferent, don't really know. And so if you say, hey, well, it's this because of this and it's different, then they're like, oh, okay, I gotcha. And so you've earned not necessarily an ally, but you haven't created an enemy, which that's better.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the biggest argument for this, for hunting and how, it can be extremely good for the environment is if you look at a video, an article that CNN did a number of years ago. I actually wrote a follow-up article concerning their article, but basically this guy, Corey Knowlton, won a tag to hunt a rhino over in Africa, an endangered species. And I think he paid $350,000 for it. So it generated a big buzz among the anti-hunting groups saying that, rich trophy hunter goes to Africa to kill endangered species. What they didn't really talk about, though, is the amount of funds that he generated. Like, a lot of people like to beg on trophy hunters, but trophy hunters have literally saved so many populations over in Africa, and has provided better management, and hunting over there has provided better management today than ever in the history of Africa. It's really amazing. And CNN followed him over there to do a story on from the angle of, what this, trophy hunter going over to kill this poor innocent creature and why he's doing it. And their perspective literally changed from that to, as the story came out, to the benefit that trophy hunters have on the management after they see what really went on over there. It wasn't a bloodthirsty guy wanted a rhino head on his wall to beat his chest and say hurrah about it. There's a lot of in-depth stuff that went on during that period, and they were able to provide hundreds of thousands of dollars for conservation and prevent poaching and to keep those animals alive over there. It is really, really cool to see.
It's a hard thing to kind of get your brain around. You like to think there's clear right, clear wrong. And so while I don't really have much of an interest to go to Africa, like you said, like, you can charge whatever you want because people are going to go over there and they're going to hunt, and that money goes somewhere. It's not just some rich other person doing that. That goes to everything, and it goes to protecting those species. And it's not what people want to hear as far as, wait, how can hunting save a species and how can a hunting, area prevent poaching? But that's just the way things are. And
that's because a lot of people, I just think they truly don't understand that nature does not care about human emotions.
Yeah.
Nature is going to do what nature has done for hundreds of thousands of years. And now that we have grown as a species and expanded so far into the kingdom, we have to artificially help manage nature do what it used to do when it had a lot more ability to manage itself. Because now animals have a much smaller area, and predator and prey populations affect each other a lot more amplified than they did thousands of years ago. So, you want to get rid of hunting across the entire planet? Well, let's get rid of all of our cities, turn them back into forest, and go back to living in, smaller nomadic lifestyles across the landscape and get rid of 99% of the population.
Yeah.
That's just not realistic, So you got to understand science has affected every way of our life as Americans and as humans in today and age. And hunting now is literally kind of an extension of that science.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of a good closer. You got any other closing thoughts?
Not too much. If you guys are, if your public land and the ability to hunt your public land is as important to you as it is to me, I highly suggest you get on the Alaska Outdoor Council and, pay attention to some of the issues in the next couple of years. I promise you, some of the biggest management cases that have affected Alaska are going to be coming to head here, and they will affect every single sportsman and Alaskan across the board. And I think everybody should know about those issues and be involved. And if you want to support Alaska Outdoor Council, that'd be great. We have, memberships are $20 a year. And I guarantee if you're one of our members, I care about every single one of our members' voices. And if there's an issue we should be looking at as an organization, I want every one of our members to be able to feel like they can reach out, and we're going to listen. And a lot of people might say this, but let me tell you, the last couple of weeks, from the time I wake up till the time I go to sleep, we deal with a lot of these issues, and there's a lot of stuff moving behind the scenes that Alaskans don't know about. And these management conversations happen every week, every year, all across the state. And you can either, let those conversations happen without you and be a victim of those other people's conversations, or you can be an advocate and join in on the conversation. So if you want to join in on the conversation, I highly suggest you go to alaskaoutdoorcouncil.org and join in. We'll be happy to have you.
Man, that was good. That was a great pitch. I like it.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, thanks, man, for being on here again. Appreciate it. Thanks for everything, man. Thanks for all you're doing on behalf of Alaska hunters and anglers, and appreciate it.
Not a problem, man. Hope to talk to you again in the future. Thanks for having me.
All right, sounds good, man.